Hey everybody, welcome back to But Why the Reviews. Today we are covering filmmaker Luca Guadagnino's Challengers, starring Zendaya as Tashi Duncan. Although the movie is not particularly about her. I'm Kate and I'm here with Jason.
Hello.
And we're gonna start with a synopsis because I feel like I have to get into it and also unpack it. So, the synopsis of the film is from visionary filmmaker Luca Guadagnino, Challenger stars Zendaya as Tashi Duncan, a former tennis prodigy turned coach and force of nature who makes no apologies for her game on and off the court. Married to a champion on a losing streak, Tashi's strategy for her husband's redemption takes a surprising turn when he was faced off against the washed up Patrick, his former best friend and Tashi's former boyfriend. As their past and presents collide, tensions run high. Tashi must ask herself, what will it cost to win? That synopsis is horrible.
I don't know. It sounds pretty right to me.
It's not technically wrong, but it feels wrong. And we can start off by talking about our expectations. And I'll lead because I thought this movie was going to be about Zendaya. It's not about Zendaya. So that's where I am. Jason.
I, I I don't know if I fully agree, but we'll talk about that in a sec. My expectations were not super formed because I knew what the plot of the movie is, and I'd seen the trailer 1,000 times, but
Yeah.
my biggest expectation was my guess at what a big twist was going to be because
Oh, okay.
because of all the previous movies that the directors made, they're all very queer, and I was like, this is totally what this movie's going to be about, and it wasn't, and I'm glad it wasn't because I didn't want it to be about what I thought it was going to be. But other than that, I'm not, I've never seen a Dune, so my largest frame of reference for Zendaya is when she was on the Disney Channel, and uh I was intrigued, and
I I will say Zendaya's not bad in this movie. I just think the trailers and marketing material make her way more essential. And maybe it's just how I read the movies. I'm actually really excited to talk to you about it
I
because
think
my
that's what it is
ex
more than anything, is our reading of it, maybe. So
yeah, because like I so getting into like we start with what we liked and what we didn't, but I think like talking about this movie more is understanding how you saw the framing of what Luca did in his filmmaking. And so, like, it's very clear that the ending of the film represents the beginning of the film, in the same type of physical match that's happening. But I think for me, overall, I thought we were going to get Tashi Duncan's story, but we only ever see her through the perspective of art or through the perspective of Patrick. And so you kind of see peeks into her life and peeks into her story, but only when one of them is attached. So ultimately, I think that it's their story, and I don't think that that's a bad thing. Like, I think it is objectively a good movie, and I think both men, what is it? Mike Feist, I'm
I
gonna
think
go with
Feist.
Feist.
I
Feist
think
sounds
so.
correct. Mike Feist, he was in West Side Story. He was like one of the very few good things about that movie. I love that man. And Josh O'Connor from The Crown, who plays Patrick. I think that their back and forth and their chemistry and kind of the way that they frame everything that's happening in the film is the film at its best. And I feel like Zendaya is just kind of there, not as set dressing, but she's there as the ball that's being tossed between the two, necessary for the match to happen ultimately, but not the driver of what's going on, was my take at least. And I don't think that's bad. I just think it's different than the marketing material. I was watching it and I was like, is this the same movie that I thought I was walking into?
I think that's a totally valid reading on this movie and the complete opposite of how I saw it. I think I saw this entire movie as her movie, and yes, a
Really?
hundred percent her character is being explored through the two boys, but the movie starts and ends with her, and the entire movie to me is about, like, she's the character that I fully understand and know what her motivations
Agree.
are and know what she's trying to do. And the two boys are like their vehicles for her like entire she
Okay.
just has the only thing that matters to her is winning, and they're the devices through
Yeah.
which she can win. And like it's this metaphor between the two
Huh.
of them of like every game has a winner and a loser, and one of them is a total loser and one of them's a total winner, and she has to play both sides of the court to be able to, come out in the end.
And okay, so this is really interesting because I saw it the exact opposite. I saw it as this was their story, and ultimately the movie starts with them. It starts with their match. It starts with them talking about her. And then it goes into ending with their last match with her in the middle and she's watching it and active. But I very much felt there's a specific scene that happens in the film where Zendaya is talking about tennis for a brief moment becoming a relationship and becoming a romance between the two people playing. And
Yeah,
I
she's shot where
thought,
she like looks like a mermaid.
yes. And I took that entire section of it to explain why you needed to watch the tennis matches between these two men. And for me, I thought that ultimately, like, we saw them through her. She's not a vehicle so much as she's a way for them to understand themselves. And that each of them throughout the film, it is just them getting back to where they need to go. She even says in the middle of the film, "Oh, I was a homewrecker, wasn't I?" And it's not so much that I am thinking about them 100% romantically. I still think that the movie is fairly queer underneath it, especially with how, like, the only like erotic scene that I think we really get that then just gets cut off at the knees towards the beginning. Like, it is very much about setting up how comfortable these two are. There's the scene in the mess hall with Patrick and Art where it's shot like a romance where they're very close to each other, but they're just eating churros. And so I took this film as not being Zendaya's film and not being Zendaya's interest in these two people so much as these two guys framing what it means to win, framing what it needs to succeed, and she just so happens to be in the middle of it. And that was how I saw it, and I took much more stake in them because even when she's central in a scene, it's how they're reacting to her. It's how they're fighting over her or how they're pushing around her, but not
Right.
just her.
Every single shot in the movie is framing her in the center, her as the focus point. Um, but maybe this is why I enjoyed it as much as I did, because I think that I also really did enjoy the relationship between the two boys, the back and forth between them. I
Yeah.
liked the way that the movie kept going back and forth in time, and it plays with their like it does the thing that I thought was going to be the whole twist of the movie is like, secretly they were actually just in love the whole time. And like, it's not secretly, they're clearly in love the whole time.
Yes.
And that's like from the
They're
first,
thunder and lightning.
right. Like one of the first shots in the movie is, Art is like doing his stretches in the hotel, and you like see him staring at the dude's lips, and you're like, okay, great. You know that he likes dudes. And this is clearly like there's
Well, then you
a
even see the
level,
Tinder. Like you see the Tinder
right.
where
And
they're like,
one
if you had
that's
any
right for the other
questions.
guy, exactly.
Yeah.
So you get both of it where it's clear like this is text, it's not subtext, but also like it's not what the movie's about.
Yeah.
Like alone, there's a lot more to their relationship, and that's definitely was interesting and exciting. And I just the way that the whole movie between like the back and forth in time and the keep going back to the tennis shot scenes, and the way that every single scene is like so much longer than you think it needs to be,
Yeah.
and the way that the like to me that was really annoying until the end of every one of those scenes, and then I go, oh, but like
Yeah.
that built so much tension and you had to have that
Well,
tension to
it
release it. And I'm
it
like,
really felt like a tennis
good job.
match. It really felt
Right,
like a tennis match where it's like,
exactly.
okay, is somebody like, when is the point gonna get scored? Is like how it felt. And the way that Luca kind of sets it up where each sequence of the film, I don't want to say like there's ultimately like 4 or 5 acts of like it's not cut up in the
Yeah,
traditional 3 act structure, but he sets it to the same cadence of tennis sets and for a full match. And I thought that that was really smart. I do think sometimes the title cards were too much. Like I
Yeah,
didn't need you to tell me
they were
every
a
time
little
you were
corny
going through
sometimes.
hours before. But I do agree. I think that the pacing and the way that it was handled did a really good job of letting you know that you're going back and forth between two characters and you understand the stakes every time and it kind of increases every time as well. The more you get to know them, the more you get to know what they can lose or what they can win. And I thought that that was really, really interesting. I am curious though, like overall, like it's I think you're right. Like it's not subtext. Like Luca was like subtext is for cowards. These two men are clearly in love with each other.
Right. Like if you've seen his other movies, you know that
Yes,
he's not
exactly.
beating around the bush.
Exactly. Um but I think like ultimately though, like what do you think outside of because I like Tashi's character. I like characters like that who are just unabashedly competitive and want to win and want to push others to win. I admire people like that ultimately, and it's what I think like real athletes are. And I think that the director would also agree that at least in how he was framing it, that's what he thinks athletes are. Um, but in terms of like developing the boys' relationship, how do you think he kind of handled that back and forth around somebody else? Because like you even said, like, oh yeah, no, it's clear that they were in love with each other the whole time. How do you think he kind of navigated it while having Tashi like be that central point? Because like I think sometimes it hit for me and sometimes it didn't. Um, what do you like? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, there's definitely my biggest thing like by the end was that I couldn't always completely tell what motivated or drove them the way that it's so clear that
Yeah,
Tashi like she wants to win, will do anything it takes to win. For the two of them, it wasn't always clear to me what they wanted, um, which wasn't like getting in the way of me enjoying the relationship, but I'm like as I continue still days later, I'm thinking about like every single thing about this movie. It's the one thing that hangs me up. I feel like though, um, at the least, they're two very different characters with very different motivations and very
yeah,
different drives, even if I can't pin down exactly what to call either of it. And
yeah,
so I just when you're watching them when they're younger and they're fire and ice, it's like it's just fun. And when you're watching them when they're older, you're like, what is going to happen? And you will absolutely not guess how the movie ends at all. And I
yeah.
at first again was just like, what do I no, oh no, yeah, this is great, I love this.
The
Just
ending
like
was weird because for a second I was like, I'm mad at this. And then I was like,
yeah,
oh, actually, I'm not. Like, you
I
just
literally
recreated.
I literally said like, is this the worst thing I've ever seen or the best thing I've ever seen? I cannot tell. And it's neither, but it's definitely great, I think, in my sitting with it even just a
Yeah.
few moments after that. I mean, especially with all the weird stuff the camera's doing, especially in the end. And
That was the
like,
one thing I did not like. You do not need to go first person for everything. I did not like the way that the camera was put as the ball. Like it was, but I also get
yeah,
motion sick while watching some things. I can't do a lot of
yeah,
shaky cam. And I was like, this is a little too
it
disruptive.
was
I did think them making noises as they were serving, it's like it's small and it's supposed to tell you that they're like trying, but also like there's more pure text there.
right. 100%. Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm curious. I think one of the big things people are going to argue about is the score and whether it was one too much and two too loud. Uh, do you have opinions?
I love the score. I love the score. Like Trent Reznor can't do anything wrong. I'm assured of. I thought it was really good. I think that it really set the atmosphere for everything. I also think that one of the things that the score does really well is it matches the tone of a back and forth. So anytime that the film goes into a moment, because while it's overall one large tennis match, each of those sequences, each of those acts, even if it's not a traditional three act structure, is back and forth. And what the score catches is the beginning of the match where it's nice and soft, and then towards the end of each one, it gets faster and the tempo picks up and it goes back towards that piece of, it's not erratic, but it's just there's a clear cadence at which the story is moving that I
Right.
think the score catches. And I think when it moves between those like synthwave beats, and it's not lo-fi, but like some of those like lower, calmer notes, I think that that is kind of expertly done to get at the point of a back and forth between all the characters.
Yeah, and like one of these things that at first I was like, what? And then I was like, oh, was every time the like it plays like a really distinctive thing in the score, and then it goes away, and you got this, you think the scene's gonna end, and then it comes back just as loud
Yes.
again. And
Yes.
it's like it does it several times, and I just every time, but the first time I was like, what is this? But eventually it actually is part of what helped me realize like this isn't like a super serious movie. It's not a like a big
Yeah.
drama. Like it's a little silly, and it's supposed to be. And
Yeah.
I am a little curious, like if I go see this again in a few weeks, like is the mixing going to change? Because
Yeah.
there were times where the score was literally louder than the people
Yes.
talking, but I also sometimes felt like it was on purpose because it's like that feeling of you're down in the tennis court, everyone's screaming around you, and you can't like you have to focus to hear to
Yep.
pay attention to what's going on, and it had that effect. It built that tension in a way that I can see it bothering some people, but and maybe it wasn't on purpose, but I think it probably was, and I think I
Yeah.
appreciated it.
No, I feel like it was. I really do feel like it was. I actually like walked away like really happy with it from the score's perspective. And I think that the score also helped me realize what was happening in a lot of sequences. Um I think like ultimately, like I don't like this is obviously not the director's like most queer film, but I do think it does do a really good job of looking at it through the eyes of competition and like through professional sport, because I think there are more than enough moments where it's very clear. I mean, there's even the situation where Patrick visits Tashi and they're like about to have sex and she keeps talking about art, and he's with it until she starts talking about tennis. And then he's like, "Oh no, 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 no. We can't talk about tennis." But art was okay. And I think that there's like what I really appreciate about him, what I think helps that I don't want to call it so much a romance as a connection. Like I think that the two of them have like grown up with each other since you were young, and they literally do not know other people than each other. And then Tashi comes in and kind of shakes that up. But I think what gets captured a lot through each of the sequences is understanding how they each relate to tennis itself. So I think that when you see Patrick, like he is that quintessential natural talent, the one that does not have to try, the one that can just hit the ball with the racket and get as far as he can go, and he falls short because of that. And Art is very much like he sees himself as somebody to be developed, but he doesn't ever want to see Tashi as a peer. He wants Tashi to be a mom, or he wants Tashi to be his coach. And it's the exact same like parallel that he did have with Patrick. Cause like there's that scene where Patrick takes the gum from his mouth that Tashi also does at the very beginning of the film. And it's emulating each other. You have to have somebody who is going hard, and then you have somebody who's kind of following along. And I think Art in both situations, whether it's Tashi or whether it's Patrick, he's kind of trailing along behind, and they both need that. And the reason that it comes into real focus is because you see that Patrick and Tashi are two people that think pretty much the same way, but because they do, they don't have respect for each other. And so I think that like for me, the film, and maybe it's because like that's what I like about the film. I'm kind of like, oh, this isn't Zendaya's film, it's their film, because I am like infinitely more interested in what is happening between them and their dynamic. And I would like to see what happens 30 minutes after the film ends.
Yeah. No, I feel the same way about the dynamic too. As my friend who I saw it with put it, it's a classic Chad versus Virgin dynamic between the two of
Yeah.
them, and Zendaya is just in the middle taking advantage of both of them
Yeah.
to try to get what she needs. Like
Yeah.
the her parallel moment from the beginning of the or beginning ish of the movie to the end of the movie, her last
Oh,
line,
yeah.
I'm like, this is what
It's
this whole
very
movie
good.
was about to
Yeah.
me. In addition to also the relationship between the two boys. But
Yeah.
um one more thing I'm wondering your thought on. The movie I think was billed as this very hot and sexy movie,
It's
especially
not. It's
especially because of
not.
the trailer, especially because of just the way that the poster and all that. And like it's it isn't not like it there's certainly like
We live in a
the
world where
the
Saltburn and
right.
Poor Things have come out. Like, this is not pushing any seductive or sensual boundary. It's
Well,
right
right,
there.
exactly. Like, do you in the couple of scenes that are like there are no sex scenes in this movie.
No.
Like, which does that bother you? Does that go against what you expected? Does that like
Yeah.
because to me, watching some of those scenes where you're expecting that to be the case, I really respect what they did on purpose with all of them. I think it's like makes perfect sense with what the movie is, but I also get this little bit of a feeling that some studio executive went to Luca and said, "You make things too gross and too sexual in your movies. You have to dial it down for this one because it's getting a bigger release than you usually get."
So that's what it felt like.
Right.
So I personally really respect, so I think sex is a narrative tool. And I think when a movie uses sex well, it works. And I think that I don't think Luca's filmography is always good when it comes to his sex scenes, but I think that the marketing material and the trailer for this capitalized on the inherent eroticism that comes with his films. And I think what happens ultimately here is it pulls back. It feels like every time it's going to go there, it stops and comes back. And now that you say it, I understand it from the perspective of the overall film,
Right.
but it
Like
does bother.
that's entirely what Zendaya's character is. Like
Yes.
it's on purpose, but it
Yeah.
also just felt like but maybe they meant to have a little more and they told them no.
I think for me, I think for the amount of power that she exerts in their dynamic with all three of them, I actually think it would have been bolstered to have seen, which I mean, like, it's not really what you see in the trailer is pretty much the extent you get. Like, they make out. That
Right.
is about it. And I do think that I think if they let Patrick and Art go further, either with each other or with Zendaya, I think it would have given it even more strength as to like kind of how she's overseeing it, because that sequence in the hotel is kind of her first triumph, like the first realization of what she's able to do and like
Right.
how she's able to watch two people play the game for her. And I think it had just gone a little bit further, it would have done more. So it would have done more for the power fantasy of it all that she's feeling. But then it also would have gone further to sell just how comfortable Art and Patrick are with each other in this type of intimate moment. Because I think that like the intimacy between the two is something that's always, you understand it at the beginning and you kind of see it a little bit as you go out through the rest of the film. um but I think had it been solidified in that moment, I think it could have gone farther. So I don't think all of the scenes needed to be as erotic as what you would expect from that director, but I think that scene in the hotel room could have gone farther. And I think had it gone farther, it kind of would have bolstered everything else.
Yeah, I'm not sure how I actually feel other than like that not great feeling of this. I feel like he wanted to do something differently.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
It
it would be such a different movie though
it would be.
if there was more graphic scenes, if there was more eroticism to it, and I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing because it's not the movie we have, but
Well,
it's definitely, I'm curious for
well,
sure.
I also think it's hard too because like I do think that like there is a fair amount of eroticism in the film. Like I think
Yeah,
that scene of them eating churros like right next to each other's faces, like it's really small, but like Patrick pulls the art stool closer to him
right.
before Art sits down in it. Like
It's such a good scene.
there are those little things where I think that there's implied intimacy. And maybe that's like what people want or like what he wanted to explore, like the forbidden thing that you can't do. But I just think for a director who like literally showed a woman consuming the love of her life in his last film, uh he could have gone further here. That's just what but not throughout the whole film. Like I think there's like almost a safety in the two exploring that while Tashi's there, which is why like there's not like repulsion or anything that happens when Patrick and Art like do like
Right.
kiss each
And
other
they
essentially.
obviously liked it.
I obviously liked it. There's no like attempt to hide it, but I also think that like there's a lot of performative masculinity that happens between the two of them, both on the court and as they keep playing through sports, even in their competition for Zendaya's character. And I think had that situation gone farther, it would have showed you the level of like deeply intimate moments that they are capable of having and then how they're pushing back on that as they pursue Zendaya. And I think that that would have given it more depth personally, mainly because we know that this man just makes queer movies consistently.
Right.
And so I feel like that is definitely the thing that feels pulled back from.
Yeah. There's something to me to the telling, not showing that I am appreciating, but
That's fair.
I definitely would like to see the version of the movie that goes a little further in certain scenes.
Yeah. Which like I do agree with too for the telling and not showing aspect of it is that you do end up with something more subtle and I think more palatable ultimately. Um
Because
I
like you
don't
said,
know.
and like we both said, it also isn't that kind of movie. Like
Yeah, it's
ultimately, like
not. It's not.
it would
It
feel a
really
little
isn't.
out of place given that this is a movie that isn't as self-serious
Yeah.
as the marketing maybe made us think it would be.
No, I think that's fair.
I mean, it
That's fair.
literally has first-person tennis cameras. Like I
No,
so
that's extremely fair, and I do think that that is very much the movie that he was making. So maybe he wasn't held back from showing more. I do just think so. There's been a slew of movies that I think that marketing has been the downfall of. I watched Fall Guy out of South by, and it is one of like the best action movies I've seen. Like action comedies I've seen. The trailer is terrible. Civil War, the trailer is terrible. I know we have different feelings on Civil War, but I think that the trailer, regardless, paints a different movie than what you're going in to expect. And I think
yeah.
this movie ultimately also paints a different movie than what you're going to expect. And I know that it took forever for it to come out as well. So that is one of the things that I do wonder, like, was this a different movie when it first screened? And was this a different movie when it was supposed to come out like last year? And did it change before we saw it now? That's a question that I have overall, because I do think that there are some hits that don't go as hard.
Yeah, I mean that's why I try my best not to watch too many trailers, show up to the movie theater late so that I don't
That's
have
fair.
preconceived feelings about movies that when clearly trailers are not matching what,
Yeah.
let alone what's in the movies, the problem that we had for the previous 5 years, like just what the
Yeah.
tone of the movie is. The one thing that does absolutely match the marketing though is like this entire, like so much of the marketing is this is a movie starring Zendaya and she is powerful, and
Yeah.
that is
Yeah.
true.
She
Like
is powerful. That
when I
the Bob is
when we walked
bobbing
out of the
and
yeah, when I walked out of the theater, I was like, is there any other actor who has ever existed that could play this role and it would be the same movie? Like I just don't think so. Like it just
yeah.
feels like for as much as I don't feel like she's been in terribly many things or had very many different kinds of roles, there's just something about the way that in the last 5, 6 years that she shows up to the Met Gala wearing a suit of armor, and you just like, this is the
Yeah.
like the energy that she gives, even having not
I
played tons of roles like that necessarily. You just like,
yeah.
yeah, this is who she is, and makes perfect sense in this movie.
I do think the only thing that I don't like entirely, and this is more of me with what Zendaya's career has been, but she's consistently like the black woman taking care of white boys, and I don't like that. It
Yeah.
feels really off. I know that some people had some black women film critics specifically have talked about like her embodying almost like a mammy motif, like with these two boys, with how much she does
I mean, she literally
take care of
says
them.
like
And
makes
she
a
says,
comment
yeah,
about
like
that
me and my two little
exactly.
white boys, she does.
Yeah.
It doesn't make it right. It
Right.
also doesn't erase the fact that that's been like consistently what she's been playing. So that's like my only thing. I do think she's really, really good in this role. I don't think she has as much agency as you think she does. Because I think I think my critique of it ultimately with her character, I think her character is expertly portrayed. She's a really good actress that I think needs to get a lot more work. I think the costuming across her ages was also very good, especially with the hairstyling. But I think my main issue is that there is still enough in ambiguity between her and the two of them that at times it feels like they're pushing her instead of her pushing them. And so, like, where you describe her as kind of like watching these two men do this thing and her kind of like getting the win from it, I think that's there. I don't think it's there as much as I want it to be, because I think when at the end of the film where he does the little like racket thing without giving away too much of what it
Yeah.
means, I think that was asserting them back into their own space
Yeah.
where she's
But
not
it
a
only
part of
happened because
it.
she orchestrated that whole thing. Which, like, did she really orchestrate it?
I'm like, he showed up to
Like,
her hotel every day. So, like, did she really orchestrate it?
yeah.
Because she even says in the film, oh no, I didn't want to embarrass him this way. Like she didn't
Right.
particularly plan this part out.
Somewhere around like Act 4 or 5, I started to go, did is she losing it? Did she ever have it in the first place?
Yeah.
And I think by the end, I was convinced at least that like she knew exactly what she was doing the whole time. Maybe that's just wishful thinking and not totally the right read on it. But because I definitely did have that like once during that fourth act when things start going uh like catch the two timelines start catching up. I was like, what's going on? There was literally a moment I wrote in my notebook. This feels like a different character when they're
Yeah.
sitting when they're having that conversation in the like in the alleyway. I was like,
Yeah.
this is a totally different character. Where did all of her power
Yes.
go? Where did all of her like control go? And then I felt like she had it back again in the end, but I
See, and
definitely
that's the
take
thing.
the
In
point
the
of
end, I didn't think she had it anymore. I
yeah,
thought she was just watching two people make that connection. That's what I thought. I thought
mm,
in that moment she had become the spectator again. And while it was powerful at first, because these two men had taken back their agency, she was actually just watching. It was no longer a competition over her so much as it was a competition that she was involved in or kind of
right,
too. And I feel like the embrace at the end kind of sells that point because it's no longer about her at that. Like the way the film ends, I don't think that she maintains enough power to make it like, oh, this was her movie so much
right.
as it wasn't,
Makes
oh,
sense.
she never really mattered.
Yeah, makes sense. I think because everyone gets what they want in the end in some form or
It's
fashion.
fair.
It
Yeah,
feels like
they do.
it
They
felt to me
do.
like
Yeah.
she feels like she won. They both feel like they won, some in all different twisted kind of ways. And so
Yeah.
maybe that's why I felt that way. But I'm
That's fair.
definitely curious to watch it again now, like knowing how it ends from the beginning and
Yeah.
see where my attention is drawn, see who I feel like has the control at any given point.
No, I think that like
You know, that's tennis. You're right.
yeah, yeah, like I don't watch too many films like multiple times unless I really love them. I do think that you're right though. I think that this would warrant another watch with the ending in mind to see if we can track who has the point at any given moment. And I think
Yeah,
that
you
that is
don't
something
watch
really well done.
750 or whatever movies a year like I do and watch too many
No.
movies multiple times, but this is one I like very much would enjoy going back to see it in IMAX, just like to experience it.
I won't watch it on IMAX because that camera motion made me very sick just for the
Well,
few like minutes it was happening.
if this made you sick in IMAX, don't see Civil War in IMAX.
I watched Civil War in IMAX. I had no problem with it.
Hmm. Yeah, I guess that was more of a rattling my bones harder than I've ever felt sound than it really was a
Yeah, I was
shaky
like, the
cam
sound
problem.
has no problem.
But
It's the visual piece and how my brain
yeah,
processes what visual things happen that gives me vertigo. But yeah. So would you tell people
challenges.
to watch this?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I think it's a good one. I think so. I told my girlfriends that we were gonna watch a double feature of Saltburn and Poor Things, which we did. So I think I'm going to tell them that we're going to watch Challengers and I will come up with a second movie because I think that this would be a good one to watch with them in general. So I really do like it. Like I have my issues and I keep trying to separate whether or not it's a marketing team problem or a Luca problem, but I think overall like I am happy with it. I'm at like an 8.5, I think is what I gave it for like my overall score in my review that you can read at butwhythough.net.
I'm grateful not to have had to have actually given it an official score. My Letterboxd is 4 out of 5 stars. So I think we're definitely in the same
Yeah.
range of feelings and some stuff still up in the air, but that's I think part of what's so good about it is there's a lot to chew on there.
I think the acting in general, which is very good.
Oh,
Like,
absolutely.
yeah, like Mike Feist though. I questioned why I was attracted to him in West Side Story. I understand why I'm attracted to him in Challengers.
Yeah, my singular issue with this movie is that the entire time I'm watching him, I just kept going, John Mulaney,
Ew, why?
because he looks like him with red hair
No,
and talks
he
like him. He
doesn't.
absolutely does. It's like
Huh.
the whole time,
On
the
that
whole time.
note, Jason, where can
Exactly.
people find you and your horrible taste?
I'm not saying I'm glad for it. It was the worst part of the movie
Okay,
to
okay.
me. But find me at but why though flatter underscore you on the socials that we rarely use these days.
And you can find me at Oh My Myth Randier on all of social media, and you can read all my work at butwhythough.net. You can find my full review of the film, which is an 8.5 out of 10, down below in the description thingy. I always like do this with my hands and don't know if it's working. But yeah, check that out. Read it. It's great. And like and subscribe because we're like really close to 1,000 subscribers now, which is really
Heck yeah.
nice. So come for more of our hot takes, please.
Yeah,
Uh,
like how Ghostbusters Frozen Empire is good actually.
Ew. Oh my God. Yeah, that video is here. Okay, thanks. Thanks for watching, guys.